quorum. I think we'll call the meeting to order. Now, Brian, were we gonna do the motion to call the meeting to order like you had in those documents?
We'll just do it like we have been doing it for this month, next month.
All right, call the meeting to order. First item would be the review and approve the minutes.
You want to call a roll?
Oh, I'm sorry. The roll call. And
Commissioner Brock?
Here.
Commissioner Kinzer?
Here.
Commissioner Nemec?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell is absent. Commissioner Clements?
here.
Commissioner Cron is absent. Chairman Lyons?
Here. All right. Now we'll review and approve the minutes. Everybody had a chance to review minutes from last meeting? Here. Any questions or concerns or corrections? Take a motion to.
Sure, I move we approve the minutes from the October meeting.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. All right. We do not have any preliminary development review or plans for review. We'll move to consent agenda, and prior to that, just going to I'm going to do this every meeting, just some comments to the commissioners. If anybody has any third party or ex parte communications, or if they've had any communications with any of the applicants, they've discussed any of the applications in any way, shape or form separate from the meeting, or have any conflict of interest, we'd like you to let us know that at any time when it comes up to that particular application. So I'll just kind of remind everybody once, in the beginning of each meeting, just if you happen to have some discussion that's outside of this. Doesn't mean you have to recuse yourself, but we can discuss it and decide if it's something that would need to be recused. So, all right, we'll move forward to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anybody would like to have pulled off the consent agenda to discuss after? Anything specific? I'll be open for motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda items. I second.
All right.
Your timing's exactly when I was starting another meeting. No, it's cool.
Sounds like Michelle. All right, Michelle, you cannot object.
Hi, Michelle, your mic is on.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And let's see, there is no old business. And we'll move to the new business for the PUD 2101, subdivision 2104, design review 2131 at 116 Thule Street. Is Tim Davis here for Rail West? If you'd like to present your application.
My name's Tim Davis. I'm with Rye West Homes. I live at 7872 Ritchie Road in Fruitland, Idaho. And I'm here to present the development of the Black Bear condominiums over on the corner of Thule and McBride. And I have kind of taken over this project. It has gone through this process a couple years ago, but the previous developer never finished the final plat, and so it expired. I've since purchased the property and going through the process again. So there's kind of a lot here. I don't think I'll go through all of the things. I'm just going to kind of summarize, and then I'll just kind of open it to what questions you might have for me. The previous development, where I'm pretty much mimicking the same thing. When I say pretty much, some of the highlights are that it is in commercial space. So because of that, that previously they required so much square footage, and that kind of accounted to a couple of 2-bedroom units and a couple of 1-bedroom units to be deed restricted for local housing. And so we're obviously, keeping that. There's also There was also a comment that Brian made, the previous development kind of omitted the requirement of curb, gutter, and sidewalk. And now the commission is asking for the curb, gutter, and sidewalk. I personally don't have an issue either way. It's the expense, there's a little more expense, of course, to the curb, gutter, and sidewalk, but we're not talking a huge amount. So, on my way here, I walked through the condo units right here and noticed that there was no curb, gutter, and sidewalk on that road. It was kind of an asphalt pathway. So, I'm going to leave that up to you and the city to kind of make that final decision, and we'll go with whatever that recommendation is. I think the reason they omitted it before is it kind of, it pushed into the property a little more, and the property raises up if you look at the topo that you have in the packet. And so curb, gutter, and sidewalk would require a little bit more of a retainer, a rock wall retainer that, of course, the civil engineers would design and do. So again, I want something that ultimately looks nice and it's appealing, curb appealing. And so, I'm kind of open to whatever's decided there. Let's see, there was a couple other comments. There was a number of comments from the city engineer. Basically, everything in there were things that I think, because it was the civil had a preliminary, there were things that were missed. So all of those are very minor, nothing that we don't plan on correcting on the final plat. Let's see, they required a couple of additional amenities. One of them was a barbecue unit, a barbecue area. And so EPCOAST is working on a final design of that, or at least a conceptual design, because it was asked that we had that before the city council hearing. But there is, on the civil plans, you can see there is an area for a covered structure and a barbecue area. And it was proposed that there was bicycle parking for the second extra amenity, which is required, so that doesn't count as an extra amenity. So the architect at EPCOAST suggested a horseshoe pit would be a second amenity that I would most likely propose, unless we come up with something else before then. The last thing was I met with the Parks and Rec department a couple weeks ago, and there's also the requirement in there that the developer does some added amenities or adds a certain amount of money to go into the fund for the Parks and Rec to go through and upgrade the city in certain areas. And so they had decided that they want me to construct a pathway that goes through the property that's directly to the north of my property. It's a 15 or 16, I believe it's a 16-foot section there that is owned by the city, or at least I've been told by several people, including, I called the title company to verify that. They said it is owned by the city. We have some neighbors right to the north of us, the Fishers, and they object that. They're really opposed to that pathway. I suggested to the Parks and Rec department that perhaps maybe we could go through our development. But they ultimately decided, well, since the city owns this, there's just no reason why we shouldn't go through the city pathway rather than going through parking area, and that structure. So I just made the suggestion that the Fishers, they've been using that section of road for their access their property for the last 30 years. And so I made the suggestion to make sure they still have that access. And Parks and Rec department didn't have any opposition to that. So, it's at least something I can do. I know they're still opposed to that. But that's the only opposition that I have received other than that. So, anyway, going back to that pathway, I believe that the Parks and Rec department asked for the pathway and to add additional funding to go into the pool for the Parks and Rec department. And I'm just proposing to do the pathway only because it states in there you do an upgrade, or in lieu of that you do cash. And they were kind of asking for both. I didn't quite understand why, but, so I'm just proposing to just do the pathway. And that's all. So other than that, the pictures that you have in your packet, that's all what we're proposing. The 26 units, the color, the scheme, the design of what we got there is what we're looking at. So with that, what kind of questions can I entertain?
I think we'll do the staff report and then we'll see if we have more questions for you.
Okay, have a seat.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Did you say his address for the record?
He did.
Yeah, okay. All right, new staff report.
Parker, city staff. As kind of indicated, this application came through in 2019, virtually identical to this one. The plat has expired, or the timeline to get the final plat approved has expired. As such, we should consider this to be a new application. The market has changed, needs of the community have changed, code has changed slightly. Generally, I think staff and the applicant are in agreement on a lot of things. Some items to note on here. The letter from the airport manager was a little confusing. He sent a draft to me, and then we had a phone meeting to discuss it. He said that he was going to remove the statement about recommending denial, and then didn't and went on vacation. So just so you're informed on the background of that bit of information. Then the parks fee, as discussed, the original entitlement in 2019, the parks dedication requirement was satisfied through constructing the pathway between Thule Street and the existing railroad right-of-way pathway that kind of follows Mission Street. So that never got constructed, obviously, but the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee recommended that because the market had shifted so dramatically in the past 2 years since that entitlement, that a greater contribution was warranted. And their recommendation was to construct the pathway and provide an in lieu fee equivalent to their full 0.72 acres that is required by code. So that is what they recommended. As the applicant stated, they are willing to construct sidewalk along the frontage of the property. It is a little bit of an island in there, but we don't want the inverse to be true in a few years should things redevelop or we find funds to construct sidewalk, and then the island of no sidewalk. In that same vein, one of the conditions of approval is to shift the buildings forward a couple of feet so they're no more than 10 feet from the property line. Given that he is constructing sidewalk, given the topography there, it may be challenging to do that and to push snow in the right locations. So you may want to consider revising that. That code is really intended for more commercial spaces than, this is a commercially zoned property, but it is more residential in nature in the surrounding neighborhood. So in more intensive commercial spaces, we want a more building forward street frontage to provide eyes on the street and perceived safety and things of that nature. But yeah, I think other than that, we are generally in agreement, and I'll stand for any questions.
The clarification, Brian, it's the city that's requesting that improvement of strip of property to the north,
Correct. That,
because the city owns it.
yes, I
And
called the assessor's office an hour ago and confirmed that their records show that it is platted as McBride Street.
correct.
It is vastly substandard, 16 feet wide, but it is platted as a public street and we own it.
And that does or doesn't cut off access to the Fisher property to the north of that.
The Fisher property has a vehicular access to their carport to the north of this. They have been using the undeveloped McBride Street right of way as an access point to get into their backyard to do yard work and things.
Oh, all right, okay. So it hasn't become some sort of wacky prescriptive easement over time. That's what I was asking. You guys check that one out to make sure you're not stepping in it. Okay,
And we are not proposing to eliminate their access in any way. We are just wanting to utilize that space for more access for bicycles and pedestrians.
okay.
And as we talked a little bit before for the meeting, that so Parks and Rec is saying because of the valuation of the property, clearly more now than when we give the initial approval, they want more parksmen.
That is,
Was that ever, I don't remember that being based on evaluation of property on what they were requested to do.
That's what
I don't remember that when we approved this the first
I
time.
don't remember that on any property, as far as evaluation of a property changing.
Kind of an irrelevant request. The
Yeah,
basis is irrelevant, I should say.
What is the code section that,
I can never remember it's 9310 is the code section. And by code, all subdivisions of 9 lots or more are required to dedicate 0.0277 acres of land per buildable lot. So in this case, that equates to 0.72 acres, which is most of their property. The other option is that they can choose to pay an in lieu fee. Typically, the city and the developer don't really love either of these options because they wind up with a bunch of pocket parks that then have to be maintained by the city, or the developer kind of puts in a bare minimum, like I mentioned, freezing called. And so it kind of shifts a little bit, and we try and seize on opportunities where they may take advantage of the fact that they're already doing construction work for like paving the sidewalk or the parking lot. They can build a pathway while they're at it. And that's kind of,
when they do a fee, how do they determine what the fee amount is?
it is to be appraised at equivalent value. I did my best at drafting up how that process would work in condition of approval number 12. The estimate shall be provided by a certified general appraiser licensed by the Idaho Real Estate Appraiser Board. The estimate shall be reviewed and approved by staff and in conformance with procedures established by McCall City Code 9.3.107.
Okay. And so right now they're asking for both. Am I getting that right?
That is,
Both the pathway and
and
the full.
right, full in lieu fee.
And is that a first for this type of application?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
I'm gonna say,
Yeah, I've seen that before.
it actually puts more cost onto it and time, because good luck getting an appraisal done
It does.
easily.
I'm wondering about the cost of the pathway as well.
Well, now the pathway, is it going all the way over to the other pathway? So
Yeah.
across the
Airport.
whole distance, not just the distance to the pro, okay, that's what I thought. Just want to make sure. I don't know, to me, that seems pretty substantial.
It is, and the developer's agreeable to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good distance. Right now, I mean, that whole neighborhood has to go down and along the road and
Yeah,
Is there a cost estimate for that
I know,
pathway?
it would be nice to have actual numbers.
And would it actually equal out to the market value?
The applicant may know a little more than I have not seen a cost estimate.
I don't have anything right now, but as you're talking, let me look and I can kind of
That's good.
come up with a rough number.
Do you know about what the distance is?
I'm gonna look that up right now. I don't.
It seems like if they were very unequal, then maybe that would be a fair ask, but if they're,
well, yeah, that would make
Maybe
sense. And
do a smaller fee, you know, if it only costs half as much
to
as
mitigate
it
the
would.
cost, yeah.
well, sure, and the other change from the prior approval is this sidewalk and curb gutter sidewalk island they're creating on Thule. That's a significant expense, even for that little patch to go in there and set grade, do the drainage, do curb gutter and sidewalk, which I understand why the city wants to do that, but I think the city needs to respect the cost to the developer for doing that.
on the type of homes that are along that street or homes, I don't see them going away anytime soon. And you got a brand new
Right.
one being constructed, I think at 204. There's homes right along there. I just don't see a sidewalk. Is there an option? I mean, I don't even know if just a paved pathway would make any
That's
sense,
I
but
think.
at most, it's just not going anywhere.
Sidewalk without curb and gutter, maybe, but it seems
Just-
like curb and gutter might be weird.
And you may also want to consider the other going south off of this property to the fire station, then on to Dinehard.
Well, the fire station's all parking area there, so they're not gonna have a sidewalk
That's
there.
shorter.
So you only have one property between this property and the fire station, because the fire station's not gonna put a sidewalk. They've got parking and they pull in there.
Right.
I don't see that. I mean, they didn't do a sidewalk when they built it.
And is there storm infrastructure to handle the collection of surface water that would go onto that curb? It has to go somewhere.
Right.
Logically, it'd go into a storm.
That's what I'm looking for.
So on a curb gutter sidewalk island, where does the water go?
Morgan is on.
That's starting to go downhill. It goes south from that property down. I'm
Down
trying
to the
to,
fire station.
yeah,
Then how is it
but
dealt with?
with the property next door, it's gonna flow right to there, and I can't even picture if they even got a culvert in their driveway. It's been there, it's an old home that's been there
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah, that old three-story kind of
Yeah.
thing right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't,
Does the city have any planning for adding any of the, I know that was talked about in here, just remind me,
For adding,
sidewalk to Thule.
not at this time. The Pathways Master Plan, I believe, calls for a sidewalk in there, but we don't have any like concrete, pardon the pun.
Just a generalized something.
Yeah, it's a wish list at this point.
I could see it being beneficial to access the pathway
That's what I was just thinking too.
Great.
because pedestrians and bikers going around the fire station and along that road to get to the pathway, it's a little dicey.
Right.
And that is, I mean, I send my kids up Thule.
Yep.
All the time.
Yep.
Because it's a nice, quiet street.
Right.
Which I think the community of McCall plan actually says that that's the pedestrian kind of route.
But I can't see curb and gutter myself. I could maybe see a paved meandering pathway just across the frontage, but
Can you hear me? This is Morgan Stroud.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I am the staff engineer for anyone who doesn't know. And there is a stormwater system south of this property. And so if we did put in curb gutter and sidewalk, it would just need to extend that drain sewer gravity main. And there's the calculations that would go with it to make sure that you reduce the flow enough to not overflow that pipe and that it has capacity. So there would have to be work done to engineer that correctly. For 204 Thule, we did have them install a drainage swale just because they're at the top of the hill. So even if there isn't a curb and gutter, there would still need to be some sort of stormwater conveyance included with this project along the frontage.
Morgan, do you think, so are you thinking with the sidewalk, they wouldn't do the swale?
We do have an option to separate that sidewalk and the swale. I think it's in Brian's report that he put together. It has our typical cross sections in there. And you can place this, like the path or sidewalk behind the swale that's incorporated for the roadway. And that's what we typically see. But since this is a higher density or zoning density, it triggers more of the sidewalk. Or it's zoned commercial, I believe.
It slopes up to the property. I just don't see the swale. Oh, that's gonna fit in there.
I would. Right now, there's a borrow ditch in here, isn't there? Along the roadway?
I don't think so. I think it just goes up to it. These pictures unfortunately have,
Proposing a borrow ditch, there's culverts shown.
can't tell in the picture, but I think it just goes and goes up. You're gonna have to dig down to it because just goes up. I'm almost certain there's almost no, I mean, if it is, it's very small.
It's sloping to the south.
Yeah, I believe
Right within the right of way on the sheet 3.
photo 3 here shows, I mean, it's covered in snow, but I believe it just is a flat.
No, I'm
Right up to
saying
the road.
they're showing
They're trying to construct a swale.
a borrow ditch, they've got fiber wattles, a culvert, some check dams, riprap at the ends of the culvert in the road right of way. So if you put I don't know, grading wise, you have to look, but if you put a sidewalk on the other side of that, maybe, like up more up, I don't know. Let's see.
On this side or that side?
So this
I
is
just think you're gonna have to tear way back into that property and do a retaining wall
Right, okay.
to even have a hope of doing a sidewalk.
Roadside or farther in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't, I mean, these contours here aren't, oh, for sure, but.
If you look at the color picture, you can see, I mean, I go by there all the time. I have a house just down below it. It just, it's there and it goes up. So you're gonna have to dig into that, probably take some trees out. I don't know if they were already planning to take those trees out, but it's,
I mean, their contours look pretty, their proposed contours look pretty, like they must already be planning. To me, that's what it looks like.
do you have thoughts on what you're doing across the front? Or does it depend on sidewalk or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, are you guys looking at this sheet here?
Not so much that, there's
Okay.
that and a picture of it, and I know that property that it seems to just pretty much go right straight up from the road, not straight up,
Yeah,
but it slopes up pretty good from the road.
It does go up quite a bit, and I guess I haven't met with the civil engineer enough to determine exactly how much retaining wall would be required there.
So this would be
That's where
that
the right of way would
unzoned,
be.
that's the pathway that extends through there.
Oh, okay.
So then their entrance to their property is down there and here someplace, but you can see the,
I can see it, that it's there existing. But their proposed grading, to me, looks like they've sort of graded that out and their contours. Like their access isn't it's got a slope on it for sure, but it's not, to me, it doesn't look like it's like, oh.
Well, no, but it's enough that if you're gonna do a sidewalk, you're gonna cut in and have to do retaining wall.
You think so?
Yeah. Unless you're gonna take all that back out and grade it way back in. Which, are you, let's say, are they trying to grade it back in, or is it gonna?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, they definitely have a big cut in there to taper that entrance going up into the development. You know, so you have you can do that where there's not a building in the middle, but on the two sides where there's a building there, then certainly we'll have to cut that back and add a retaining wall. Is it a 3-foot retaining wall or is it a 10-foot? I'm guessing more like a 6, but it's just hard to say until they do all the final design. It looks like on this page here that has the 3 options. All 3 options basically, include a 60-foot right of way. So regardless of whether we do a pathway or curb and gutter, I mean, to me, it looks like the curb and gutter is the least, after looking at this, the option that would make the worst sense really, because now you're funneling all that water downstream versus having a drainage swale in there with the dams and the bottles to kind of control that drainage.
Yeah, I personally just don't see a sidewalk going in there. I see a pathway with the drain or swale there or something, but I drive by it all the time. I just don't see a little chunk of sidewalk right there.
By sidewalk, you mean curb, gutter?
Curbs, yeah.
Yeah, that's what,
Say pathway, what do you mean by that?
Well, like a paved separate path.
Oh, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
That's what
They're suggesting sidewalk curb and
oh,
gutter.
yeah. No, I agree with that.
yeah.
I don't. But even the pathway, it almost sounds like. I don't know, it's hard to tell from this grading plan if that would even be doable. How wide is Thule, do you know,
I believe it is 40 feet.
of pavement? Of right of way.
Yeah, it's showing 40 on.
It's showing 40 feet on the preliminary plat.
But yeah, then your snow.
What would it include, or what would it require for a pathway? Not curb and gutter, but just a pathway. I'm sensing hesitation.
Morgan, are you still there?
I am still here.
What are your thoughts on if it was just a separated paved pathway with the swale instead of the sidewalk curb and gutter?
I think we could make that work. We would just need to work through the design to make sure the path is the right size, and we do have cross sections that show that. So it wouldn't be reinventing the wheel, at least.
So the staff
Our
recommendation, or
minimum sidewalk, the pathway width is 50. just to keep that in mind. I think someone asked about how wide it would be.
I didn't quite hear, was that, did she say 6 feet?
So our standard is typically 6-foot sidewalk,
Sidewalk.
8 to 10 foot asphalt pathway, so they would need a little bit more footprint. But they may have to do different drainage systems, pathway instead of a sidewalk.
So the staff recommendation was a sidewalk with curb and gutter, and the primary reason for that,
In code for commercial zone properties that they provide curb gutter sidewalk.
okay. And trying to avoid the island
Right.
in the future.
Yeah,
But that wouldn't have been a requirement had it been zoned residential.
correct.
I don't know, even to have a pathway, to me, now that I'm looking more at the dimensions, it seems like it'd be
But-
running right into your snow storage.
Let's continue to think about this. It is a public hearing, so
Yeah.
maybe we should open up to some public comment and then we can come back and, so at this point, we're gonna open up the meeting for a public hearing. If there's anybody that would like to speak, remember you may need to hit *6 to unmute yourself, and please state your name and address. We do not have anybody here at the Meeting Hall, Legion Hall, so do we have anybody online that would like to speak regarding this project?
Hello,
Hello?
this is Mary Fisher. My husband Monty and I called in. We own the property that's adjacent to the proposed strip on the pathway. And I think I sent some written comments in.
Yes, we received your comments.
Okay. So that just pretty much reiterates whether the city owns it. The city told us several years ago when they paved Thule. We came home from work one day and that access road was completely blocked off with a ditch and a 4-foot berm. We asked the city at that time, are they going to open it up? It's part of your road. And they told us, no, this is a private road. We have nothing to do with it, and we won't open it up. And I explained to them how vital it was to our property because any furniture or appliances would have to go up a steep set of stairs. So we use this driveway to access our home. And the city, it was even down to the city road person, told me that if I wanted it opened up, I would have to purchase and have delivered the culvert, which we did. We purchased and had it delivered. The city put the culvert in when they were paving, but they said to us they couldn't do anything about opening up access because it was a private road. And if we wanted access, we would have to get someone with a skid steer equipment out there. So that's what we did. We have opened up the road, and we have maintained it. We keep it, the grass is low during the summer. We keep it plowed in the winter. We feel that the city told us they had nothing to do with it. So we have constructed a rock wall on part of that property. We have landscaping. It's just kind of now, all of a sudden, we're saying the city's going to owns it and they're going to put a public pathway. Having lived here for 32 years, people do come up and down that. It is only human nature, I have noticed, that every single person that walks by the house looks into the picture windows of our front room. It's, the only solution to that is to cover our windows and kind of live in a cave here in McCall. So we would like to negotiate another route. The west half of that strip, down by the cabins, I have no problem with the public passing by. I just feel very insecure having the public come up a private driveway into our front yard, look into our windows. My husband and I are both retired. It just is a safety issue, and we have to oppose it, and we have to oppose it every way that we can. And that's our comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else online that would like to make a comment? Again, you may have to hit *6 to unmute yourself, and it'll take a few seconds. All right, well, we don't have any other comments, so at this point, we'll close the public meeting on this item. And is there any further, some further discussion?
Halfway to the railroad, right? There's no preliminary, we have any idea where this is gonna go type plan,
Not at this time.
as far as like route to get from here to there. Oh, you said not at this.
Not at this time.
I'm not hearing well today.
Kind of thinking there might be a few more things we might need before we can make a decision. Seems like, I know there was some questions in the last application regarding that strip of land. It was kind of out there, and the city's saying they own it, which they probably do, but I don't know how that, I mean, it does affect the neighbor. I don't know, I mean, I don't know how much more clarification we can get if it is guaranteed. I guess the assessor did say it was city land.
Right.
But it would, I guess, be also good to see if, well, moving forward with that, where it would go to the other property. It's probably pretty basic going across, but also what would happen in the front there with the swales.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Punkany from the City Attorney's Office. If you have any specific legal questions about that, I'm happy to answer.
There you go. I'm glad you're here because I was just going to comment that we're not litigators. Commissioner Clements, it sounds like the neighbor in opposition to this might need legal counsel if what has been stated is accurate in terms of the history of this property. And I don't think it's our business to be the jurisdictional body on that. Is that correct? We shouldn't take that into consideration, or is that something between the city and the neighbor?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, so I think you're on target. I mean, I didn't even really hear a claim of ownership in the testimony that I received. I think there's room to be sensitive to some of the comments that were made. I mean, but you know, the flip side of that is when you buy a piece of property, you have what's called constructive knowledge of, you know, the ownership and conditions that exist around you. And so, you know, presumably the city owned that property at the time that it was purchased by the owner. If the owner wants to make a claim to that property, you know, obviously as an advocate for the city, I think that's ill-advised, and they'd likely be subject to attorney's fees and costs in that kind of lawsuit. But that's certainly their prerogative if they wish to pursue it. I think at the end of the day, a constructive easement or something of that sort is likely to be successful. I've not been presented with any evidence that would lead me to believe that that parcel of land is anything other than an as yet unused public right of way.
Does the construction of the pathway include any landscaping or anything to help shelter and block the landowner to the north?
As the condition of approval is currently written, no. You may
It's actually a good idea.
add that in there.
It's a good compromise. Yeah.
I mean, looking through it, it doesn't look like there's probably any other options for the pathway to go anywhere else.
Correct.
It seems like that might be a decent pathway.
We would definitely, I think, need to have the applicant work with the neighbor, because if they're using that access to turn in and get to their property, if there was screening, that may block that access. Which I would think they would want screening so nobody's looking in their windows, but I don't know how that, I mean, like, I've seen it, but I can't picture exactly how that turns in there for their access.
What was the width of the pathway?
8 feet.
8 feet.
I'm guessing that anything that would be put on the pathway as far as any vegetation, the city wouldn't want any vegetation on there that they would have to maintain.
Right.
Unless if they put any structure on there, they wouldn't want to
And
maintaining it.
so it would be something that would get snow removed as well. So we would want to consider that.
Space for the blowing of that, so
Plantings.
at that, if it's only 8 feet and you're going towards the buildings,
Yeah, we've got 16 feet of pathway on the fourth with.
I think it's only 8 feet, right? Is it only 8 feet wide?
The right of way is 6 feet.
Oh, 6, okay, then pathways, okay, so you do have a little bit of space, but still.
The city would intend to keep that cleared in the winter. Snow removal.
That way you can go for a walk in the winter.
Yeah.
To nowhere.
Well, no.
To the railroad.
It connects.
The railroad
Yeah.
path,
Exactly.
which connects to everything.
Yeah.
We use it all the time. It's great.
Okay. That limits you to aspen trees fed by a drip system on the development property because you don't have a limited space. Yeah.
I can make a comment on that when it's my turn.
Probably would be good now.
Okay. In brainstorming a little bit, I mean, certainly there's, you know, I'm with you. Don't want to make an enemy. I want to do what I can to try to, you know, help the fishers. I mean, they've been there for over 30 years. It's hard to see a development come right next to you. I mean, ultimately it is inevitable, but, you know, I'd like to try to do what I can to help out. I see two options. One, I ran some rough numbers on the pathway. Probably going to run me anywhere from $70,000 to $90,000 to put that pathway in. I'm happy to say, hey, let's forget about the pathway and do the in lieu funds. That's an option. I don't know how bad the city wants that pathway, but personally, I mean, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. The other option, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the fishers feel about, you know, me doing some type of buffer strip on the north side of that 16-foot easement, which essentially be on their property, whether it's a fence, whether it's some shrub, some tall shrubbery of some sort that would kind of buffer prying eyes, that sort of thing. The last option, I've kind of looked at this, we discussed it a little bit with the Parks and Rec Department, but as of right now, there's the 16-foot strip of easement, and then there's an additional, we're offset an additional 5.5 feet of an offset. Typically in commercial, there's zero setbacks. This is kind of a multifamily, so it's, kind of a mix in between the two. The last option would be to shift the building to the north enough to bring the pathway in through the front of the, in between the buildings and through the front of the condos. That option to me seems the least desirable, but I thought I would throw that out there.
Yeah, I think that one would be tricky because I know in their last discussion, they were worried about the building being right there on them. And
Right.
that would bring it even more onto the north boundary line. So I don't know what their thoughts on that would be.
Hi, this is Mary Fisher again. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mary. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we need to discuss this. I think there is room for us to be both safe and provide the public pathway, but I don't know that this is the meeting to go through all this.
Well, thank you for that input, Mary. We'll probably have that in our consideration to have have a separate time for you to be able to discuss that with probably the developer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that item, it sounds like there is some potential of them discussing that and hopefully coming to something that'll alleviate as much of the issue as possible.
Aside from the pathway, was there anything else?
Just the recommendation as to what to do with the city's request for curb gutter sidewalk.
I'm in personal favor of the pathway with the swale. Because I just don't see a sidewalk going anywhere on that street.
Wow. I think all things considered with the adjacent properties, it's most likely the most prudent water management and retention plan versus creating what the flow would be with curb gutter sidewalk in an isolated area and then dumping it onto an area that is not equipped with the same infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents worth.
I think aesthetically, a pathway makes more sense too.
Mhm.
I mean, just one stick of sidewalk in the middle of the street, and when's the next sidewalk gonna come? I think it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
And, but presumably it would be easier to have a pathway and then reconstruct that into a curb if we ultimately go down that path, as opposed to just building it before, Field of Dreams style. So if you build it, the sidewalks will come. I don't think so.
Yeah. Not in this location. I don't think so either. It just doesn't. Yeah.
I do feel though that the pathway is a good thing to include in the conditions, especially if it's going, from the other pathway that leads over to the Mission Street.
And to me, it seems, without doing an exact valuation, but it seems a pretty reasonable value with, I don't know if it'd be needed to have an assessment done or an appraisal done.
I'm personally against having both work done and in lieu of fee. It
Yeah.
just seems like we're duplicating costs and that's not right.
Yeah,
I am as well.
I agree with that as well. With that, we could potentially, with any motions, it could be that, we need to have that as well as take out the appraisal, step up with equal value if we feel that the value of the pathway going all the way over to the existing pathway. Now, does that anything conflict in code if we say we don't want that? We don't have to do that, do we?
No.
I mean, I know we haven't had that in the past.
Parks and Rec Advisory Committee's recommendation to you, do with it what you may.
That was there, yes. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty substantial pathway.
That was condition 12.
Yeah, I think if we just cut that,
Now, on the deed restricted ones, I know in the past, you're gonna keep them as rental, or in the past, are we gonna keep them as rental, or are your thoughts of keeping a rental or sell?
Yeah, it's still, I haven't fully decided. I mean, my intentions are to keep them and rent those units out. I did call Dunright, Do Right Dunright Property Management. I just actually called them today and asked them what they typically rent out their 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom condo units for. And of course, theirs are a little bit older, but they said that it typically would be around $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. And they said anywhere from 12 to, should have wrote it down, 12 to 13 or 12 to 14 for the 2-bedroom units. I think it was 12 to 13.
So in the deed restriction, does it allow for either or? Doesn't it? Yeah.
Or for sale.
And still the applicant sets the base number on that for the base number of increase. That one needs someone with the appraisal.
Right.
No personal, no. That's not a code.
so looking through the conditions, it looks like 15. Are there any other in lieu contributions that need to go into an escrow?
There's a different code or condition of approval. I'm having a hard time finding it about escrow or a development agreement, including financial assurances if they want to get their plat done ahead of time. So that would be.
Oh, that would be applied then.
You said the airport manager was pulling his letter?
He included a letter. He was planning on pulling the recommendation for denial. The recommended conditions that he wanted placed on it have been incorporated into these conditions, and I think those are to include.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, concerns, questions? Be open for motion?
So
Or if we need more information, or if there's anything that we would need?
where did we end on the pathway with the neighbor? Anything?
Don't know if we can, I don't know if we can stipulate it that they agree to something, but I think we can ask that they negotiate something. I don't know how far we can go with.
Could we stipulate
requirement.
the developer make best effort to resolve the privacy issue with the neighbor to the north?
Yeah,
I know that's
And I-
very when.
I think at that point I would recommend maybe continuing this hearing to allow the developer some time to come up with
No, we're approving.
a plan, so we,
I would like to see, I think, what's gonna be there. I mean, it sounds like there could be something negotiated that would work, but it would be nice to know what that is before we all of a sudden it's there.
Yeah, can I speak? Yeah, I don't know if there's any way of, I mean, I like that thought. I mean, of course, I want to try to get things to go through as soon as possible. And so I don't know if there's any way you can recommend this, assuming that that's gonna happen. And I mean, obviously, this is just a recommendation to the city, and the city's gonna make the formal final decision. And I would think within the time period of now to when I have the city hearing, I'm going to meet with the Fishers and see if we can figure something out.
We did have other comments, didn't we, that were, this needs to be addressed before the city council?
yes, there are some that are prior to scheduling a hearing for the city council.
Would we be okay to do something along those lines?
Yes, yeah, I would recommend doing that as a new condition. That would, if you modified the existing condition number 13, you'd actually be speeding up the timeline. So I'd do a new separate condition about landscape screening or some agreement between the neighbors prior to scheduling council hearing.
Struggling with how one might write that condition.
Yeah.
You shall agree with the neighbor, you know, I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, if there's just no agreement, then you can't just stop it at that.
Right.
Can it be in condition that the applicant would resolve the privacy issue with the neighbors prior to the city approval? So we keep it on track? So it doesn't have to come back around to this group? So that puts the incentive on the developer to get whatever needs to be done with the neighbors with regard to the privacy issue.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Because we agree, no curb, gutter, sidewalk, and simply add a pathway on Thule, right?
My only concern is in a hypothetical world, not necessarily an actual world, where the neighbor is then, well, I want privacy and I don't want people walking, you know what I mean? And therefore is unwilling to.
You can't reach consensus.
They can't reach consensus, and then what does that mean? Does that mean the development issue is stopped because the neighbor doesn't agree on privacy? You know, I mean, it just puts, I think, it into the wrong hands before actually going to a decision. If we could do something like, you know, to the council, like, hey, this is a discussion point before you guys approve, make sure that you are comfortable with how this shapes out. Like, that seems a little more, I think it puts it in the hands of the council as opposed to, you know, putting it in the hand of a neighbor and a developer kind of duking it out. I don't know if that's something we can do though.
That would work. I mean, ultimately, it's the city's property.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Mary Fisher again.
Mary, normally we wouldn't have you speak,
Okay.
but in this case, I think it might be well worth it, so please go ahead.
Okay, when the last time the project was approved, it was approved without a pathway going in. So I'm not sure why everything's hanging on this, but I would like to inform everyone that we have secured legal counsel, and we have filed to adverse possess that driveway. So it is in litigation already. Maybe you just haven't been served the papers yet. So it's going to be just more than, if we can, but we would love to compromise if we can secure our home. That's our main concern. Thank you.
Initial inclination, if its papers have been served or imminent to being served, I mean, that could take a long time for any kind of court case, or.
Can we approve everything? Say the pathway question is.
Yeah, Bill, what's your thoughts on that? I see you popped up.
Back to the city
Yep,
attorney.
I just popped up. I'd move forward with the facts that you have. A threatened
Okay.
lawsuit is not a lawsuit.
Correct.
So,
Okay.
I mean, I have no reason to doubt what Mary has said is true, but we haven't seen it. So I would just move forward, and if somebody thinks they can adverse possess a public right of way, well, okay.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Well, with that, then we should,
Move forward.
I'm trying to remember on the last one, it seemed like we did approve the path. But maybe,
I thought we did.
I had other issues at that time on
Part of the
it.
give and take on the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Right.
guess we all seem to be thinking, let's take a few things of what we think would be sculpting as a motion. So first, we're not going to ask for the path and money for reimbursement. So we know that item will need to be addressed in any motion, that extra funds, we're not going to ask.
So that was number 15 goes away, right?
12 and
12 and 15. Wait,
No, 15 was needed for,
Because there was another.
there was another item in the development agreement.
the
If they had to put bonding or something like that.
For the in lieu funds for the parks improvements?
yeah, 15 specifically regarding parks improvements. Other
Another.
financial assurances are somewhere else.
So 12 was,
I think in 17 is the other financial assurances.
Right.
Yes, that is correct.
So we're basically cutting 12 and 15. And we're modifying 4 to say after the gutter and sidewalk.
yeah.
So to try and resolve our pathway neighbor issue, on 13, it says prior to the submitting of final plat and final development plan application, the applicant shall submit construction plans for a bicycle and pedestrian pathway, right? So that's a whole other approval process, at which point
Yes.
the Fishers would have an opportunity to jump in and say, yes, we've been consulted, we concur, we don't.
Those plans though would just go to city staff for engineering, or would they run back through us again?
So the final plat application will go, not actually had one of these come through yet, but it would go back through you guys, I believe.
The final plat would come back through us.
I believe so. It would definitely go to city council. I cannot recall if it goes, well,
I remember, it seems like we've seen some
I know,
final,
I'm like, I don't know.
I remember no, I don't think we get final plat. Did we get final plat on back?
Because
Final plat, do we get the approval and then final plat is,
subdivision review, design review, PUD,
drawing a blank.
preliminary plat. So then normally there would be a final plat that goes through the whole process again, right? Under normal, otherwise you have to do like a, like for small subs where you do both final and together.
Yeah, I can't, trying to picture which one we've had recently.
Carol said generally the final plot goes to P and Z as well.
I think the language in here covers stuff. And we don't need an additional condition to address the, work with the neighbors.
Yeah, we will need to see how that's been agreed to at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess just know that we'll be looking at that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that would.
During the final, I'm just thinking through the different things, because in my mind, like the landscaping portion would be sort of more part of the design review application versus a final plat application, so you wouldn't necessarily be looking at screening or landscaping.
No.
So can we include language to number 13 that just says to include screening?
Let's do that then.
Yeah. Then at least it's clear that it's required, right?
So applicant shall submit construction and screening plans.
Something of that nature.
I say revised landscaping plan with additional screening adjacent to the residence at 200 Thule.
Anyone open for a motion? Any more discussion?
One of these guys want to take a stab at this one? Get out of the box.
It seems like a hard one to capture all these conditions.
What was the last thing you just said? I was trying to jot it down. Landscape plans.
With additional screening adjacent to the residence.
You want me to try?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah.
I move to approve PUD 21-01, SUD 21-04, and DR-21-31 with condition of approval 4, modified to remove a curb gutter and sidewalk adjacent to Thule and changed to a pathway along the Thule street frontage. With condition 12 removed. With condition 13 modified to include The pathway shall be a minimum of 8 feet in width, constructed to the city of McCall's pathway standards, and shall include landscape plans with additional screening adjacent to the residence to the north.
Yes. Perfect.
And with the removal of condition 15.
I second.
We'll do a roll call vote, I believe, on this one.
Commissioner Rock,
Agreed.
Commissioner Kinzer,
Agreed.
Commissioner Nemec,
Agreed.
Commissioner Clements,
Yes.
Chair Lyons.
Yes.
Very good.
That was good. That was impressive.
Yeah. Good thing I practiced so much at the last meeting, huh?
Yeah.
Take a lot of notes or have a good memory.
Yeah.
All right. With that. We're down to other, which, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The other, and I believe we have sign, at least one sign. Signs everywhere, there's signs.
And it's really only the movement of one of the signs within the plan. In order to accommodate the bike path for the residents in development, they are asking to remove the freestanding non-conforming sign that is standing on top of the big berm out front of Ruby's Kitchen, or previously known as Ruby's Kitchen. Approximately, I think, did I say 12 feet further in to the frontage of the property, where the berm will also be moved. And Brian, did you approve the movement of the berm like yesterday?
Yep.
Yeah, which is basically a modification to their conditional use permit, which permitted the sign to be in a non-conforming location, because you're not supposed to put freestanding signs in like the setback from the streets, but this one was. So basically the sign is just to scoot it a few feet, make room for the bike path, and make sure that the sign doesn't get smacked by the snow being plowed off of the bike path as well. There will be better landscaping, I believe, on the berm, but that's not part of the sign itself. And I think they're gonna make the retaining wall look nice or something like that. That's also not part of the sign, it's part of the admin design approval, but should make a nice little pathway to go along with more pathway.
So-
And they're keeping the lighting that's in it, and it's gonna be downcast, nothing crazy. If it changes copy and it's no longer Ruby's or just something similar, I'll let you know, but it'll still be a restaurant-y thing. So it's interesting to see this as like marketplace that has become restaurant, and now it's a mystery, but we could be getting good eats soon, don't we?
Okay, so but you were able to do the administrative approvals, changing their previous conditional use permit?
Right, because there was a sign permit and there was a landscaping involving no structures, which are both.
Okay, so you can do that, okay. And out of curiosity, gonna make it better than concrete bags that finally eroded away to concrete?
That was pretty funny.
And that's all we got.
Here we go. Wanted to give Commissioner Clements a recognition for some good service and to thank him for his time.
You are welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Is this the last one?
Sure. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
the term ends in November. It's November.